Hello, friends in cinema. Thank you for joining us at the 47th Seattle International Film Festival. My name is Dustin Kaspar, and I'm Educational Programs Manager at SIFF, as well as a feature and short film programmer for the festival. I'm delighted to be hosting the post-film Q&A for the exceptional documentary Youth v Gov that hopefully you just got done watching. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot tribes here in the Seattle area, and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we occupy and resisting the erasure of Indigenous past, present, and future. I encourage us all to turn this acknowledgement into action by supporting Indigenous communities financially if you are able, and through centering Indigenous voices in the films, art, and wider cultural conversations with which you engage. I am very happy to be joined by three people from the Youth v Gov team today. First is Christi Cooper, who is the director, writer, producer, and more for the film Youth v Gov. Andrea Rodgers is a senior attorney at our Children's Trust, where she served as co-counsel for Juliana v. United States. And Kiran Oomen, who is one of the 21 litigants you saw in the film from the Juliana v. United States, and is a community organizer, gardener, musician, and a graduate of Seattle University. Welcome, friends.
Thanks so much, Dustin. It's really honored to be here.
I'm so honored. It's one of the things I love most about the interaction time post-film, and particularly post-films, that I truly value the people in them and the people who created them, is the opportunity literally to say thank you for all that you've done in bringing the film to us, much less the action with which you are bringing within our community. The first thing I want to kick off with is films do such a great job of kind of condensing time. I mean, this film has a huge engagement with history and etc. But I'm wondering first from Christi, and then I actually want to hear from others too, from inspiration to today, or to the film being released. What was kind of the timeline for creating this film and bringing it to audiences?
Sure, I started so. This case, as everyone saw in the film, was filed in 2015, in fall of 2015. I kind of came into this story in 2011 when our Children's Trust, which is the nonprofit organization that represents these young people in these climate litigations, they filed legal actions in every state across the country and a federal case as well. And at that time, I was working on a series of short films about some of these state plaintiffs, some of which were Shita Scott Martinez, Kelsey Juliana, and Jamie Lynn Butler, who are also in this film. So that was kind of my introduction. Actually, Andrea was also in one of those short films. And so it was kind of my introduction into the climate litigation world and working with young people and sharing their stories. And so I started actually filming this one in the spring of 2016, shortly after the plaintiffs received the go-ahead kind of from Judge Coffin. So that was kind of the moment I went to Julia at our Children's Trust and asked, will you give me exclusive access to tell this story and to continue to follow this? And we finished the film in November of 2020, and here we are today. The case is still ongoing.
Yeah. And Andrea, Christi mentioned that you were involved from back at that point. How far back do your roots with our Children's Trust and ultimately this case go?
Yeah, as Christi mentioned, the litigation campaign really launched in 2010, and that's when my colleague Julia Olson, she founded our Children's Trust, and she's really the legal genius and creative genius who's been putting together sort of these different legal theories that we've been testing in courts. So we started with the 50 states cases, also some in other countries. They were launched on Mother's Day in 2011 on behalf of youth around the world. And we learned a tremendous amount from the first round of cases. And the legal theory really evolved into what you see in Juliana. And as Christi said, we're still going in Juliana. Just a couple of weeks ago, we filed a motion to amend our complaint in response to, sort of at the end, you see the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling. And so we amended our complaint with asking Judge Aiken for permission to do that. So we're still going, and we're either headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, or we'll be back in the district court and headed to trial. So these legal journeys can take quite a long time.
Yeah, I imagine so. And Kiran, how long and when did you jump on board? I mean, we kind of saw it within the film, but specifically, and how long have you been involved in this whole process as well?
Yeah, so 2015, when they filed the federal lawsuit, is when I got involved as a plaintiff. I was a senior in high school. Now I've graduated college and live out in the country. So it's kind of been like a very large portion of my formative, life. A lot has changed for me,
Sure.
as has for the world.
Well, and having gotten involved in this at a formative time, ultimately, and I imagine, before your senior year of high school, you were passionate about climate change. You were probably aware. What was it that made you say, I absolutely have to be involved in this? This is my time, this is my place, and I'm going to use this as a springboard to do more things.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I was involved in stuff before. I grew up in Eugene, which is a town that has a history of sort of environmental organizing and action, and there's a lot of generations of people who have done stuff about climate change and like forest defense and various things like that. So I kind of got into that community when I was a bit younger. And it's actually interesting, we're talking about films. Bitter 70 was a film that older like hippie gave me when I was in high school, and it's about Tim DeChristopher, who bidded illegally on a parcel of land that was going to be sold to timber companies under the second Bush administration.
Yeah.
But he argued that he went to court for it, arguing that it was illegal to sell the lands because of protected wildlife and habitat and stuff like that. So it was interesting. I saw that movie and other movies like that kind of like inspired me to get involved, and I started meeting people. And so by the time I heard about the case, I was already pretty much in the scene. I was already doing other organizing and action, and I was like, oh, this is just another thing to try. I didn't think it would blow up. I didn't even really think it would go anywhere. I was just trying to try everything I could.
Yeah.
Because you never know,
Yeah. And Andrea, we see all these students and one of the things I love about the film, admittedly, and I kind of brought this up already within the youth engagement, is the way it literally kicks off with all these the footage of the litigants when they're younger, doing, singing songs, making speeches, etc. along that line. Was there a process of kind of vetting how many litigants you wanted to have within this, and who represented different areas of activism and or communities and that sort of thing? Or was it like these were just the 21 people who said yes?
Yeah, well, there's sort of to both ways, I mean, a lot of it, as you saw in the film, was very organic. Alex asked Jacob, and there was sort of those youth connections. Youth are incredibly connected today, as many people, as you know.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for them to connect that way. But in terms of litigation, it's also very important that we represent young people who are experiencing real climate change impacts. It's very difficult to have standing to sue in federal court. You have to have very real, strong, individual and particularized injuries. So we needed youth who were able to reflect that in terms of their own personal journey and the impacts that they've had from climate change. And you can see how important that is, I think, in Christi's film. The injury part is very important. And, over the last 30 years that climate change cases have been filed, it's taken courts a very long time to come to grips with the fact that there are individuals who are actually getting injured by climate change. They're now really starting to see that. And for us, the holy grail is, well, okay, the government's causing the injuries. Can't courts do something about that? So, and that's what we continue to fight for.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit with Juliana v. United States that it is continuing moving into either up to the Supreme Court or moving back. What other cases are, I assume this is not the only case that's happening around climate change at the moment. I imagine there's probably a mountain of cases going on. Are there, specific cases that you're involved in, or that we as people who should be more informed should be, following the Twitter account for such and such case or anything like that? What should we know about?
Yeah, well, the Juliana plaintiffs, they inspired millions of youth around the world to take their governments to court.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing to see how many people have been inspired by the Juliana 21. And I was just talking to a young girl in Hawaii, and we were talking about how she got involved in climate change, and she said, I got involved in climate change because I saw what the Juliana plaintiffs were doing, and that inspired me to stand up and tell my story. So there are cases at our Children's Trust. We represent youth in a number of state cases. We have cases in Florida, Washington State, Montana, Alaska, and a variety of other jurisdictions. We have a case in Canada as well, in Uganda and Pakistan. Wow. So, and then the Juliana youth have also inspired cases in Colombia, and in Europe. So it's really exciting to see the climate litigation movement just blossoming. And again, its courts are starting to turn and see that this is a problem that the judicial branch needs to get engaged in. So we're hopefully seeing a turn in the tide, and Juliana, as it goes forward, I think will influence that significantly.
And I would also add on to that, Dustin, that I think, when people historically, I think, have thought about lawsuits that are somehow addressing climate change, there's a lot of lawsuits out there that are against fossil fuel companies and pipelines and, coal, the coal industry. And there's all these different approaches that people have taken. But I think one of the things that was so brilliant about Julia's, development of these cases is that those are all kind of a whack-a-mole approach to actually addressing the systemic problem. We no longer can fight single pipelines anymore. We have to change the system. And so, you asking about, are there other cases out there that we should know about? And I think we do need this action on all fronts, but I think Juliana is really a unique case in our federal court systems. I don't think there's another constitutional climate change lawsuit, and certainly not one that has youth as plaintiffs.
Yeah. Well, and is there, one of the things that this movie made me think about was the wider action plan that something like this can instigate, and not just in terms of suing the government, and that we should all go out and create our own cases suing the government. But is there somewhere a kind of master plan or a guidelines for you've been inspired by this? These are the things, do we all go to the streets, or does that not have as much effect as doing X, Y, or Z within? And is there somewhere that people can access any sort of wider activism engagement?
I would love to briefly comment on that, and then I would love to hear Kiran's thoughts. I was recently on a panel with Reverend Lennox Yearwood, and he said, demonstration without litigation and legislation leads to frustration.
Sure.
And I thought that was, I thought that really summed up how we really need action on all fronts. It's important that we have people in the streets. It's important that we have people at the pipelines. It's important that we have people writing letters and petitions and talking to their representatives, and it's important that we have litigations ongoing. So I really do think, and the personal, choices that we make, those all contribute globally to the solutions. But I think it's really important for viewers to know that, they don't have to be plaintiffs in a lawsuit against the government, but they certainly can hold their government accountable in many ways. It could be from their school board to their local and state representatives, city commissioners. There's so many ways that especially young people who don't have a voice in the voting process can get involved and hold their elected officials accountable and responsible for protecting their future.
Yeah. Kiran, how do you see, your generation becoming more entrenched? I think you and your generation already are in so many ways. Are there areas that you go, friends, these are the things that we all need to stand up and do? And are there places that we can, access that beyond just hearing you say them right now?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Christie's sentiment that like the protest and the lawsuits are intrinsically tied. And if you see the history of social movements, I studied sociology in college with a particular focus on social movements. So this is like of particular interest to me, and I think that it's the lawsuits and the protests are always kind of connected, like what I mentioned about Tim to Christopher. And also I think the protests are important. Like the lawsuits, like we can't all go do a federal climate change lawsuit. Like it's kind of like that's not really like a way to plug in so much. But I think the protests I think are essential. I mean, I've broken the law to block pipelines before. And I don't have to give you details, but like it's like and I think many of the other plaintiffs as well, like this is not our only tactic, and I don't think it should be. And I think like an example like of the effectiveness of protests, I think like this summer we saw like sort of this big uprising around racial justice and police brutality. And perhaps the police have not been abolished all over the country, of course not. But just the like sort of social and cultural shifts I've seen, like as a person of color, like who kind of grew up in like mostly white movement spaces, like it's so interesting. Like after this summer, it's like all these organizers I've been organizing with for years are like suddenly asking me like, oh, about my experiences being like oftentimes the only person of color in spaces or one of the few. And then everyone from like close friends I've had for years who are like developing this new awareness to like my doctor is like suddenly aware of his whiteness. And I was just like, I wouldn't expect my doctor to be aware of his whiteness, but it needs to happen, and I don't think it would have if we hadn't had this kind of like the chaos of last summer. So I think with climate change it's very similar. Like we need a cultural shift. And so much of it, is systemic. But the systemic things and the personal changes are totally interrelated. So I'm suing the government, and I live off the grid. I'm on entirely solar power. Like I try and grow as much of my own food as possible. So I think it's like we've had so much like, we either need to do the personal thing or we need to do like the systemic change, or we need to just block, individual pipelines. There's all these kind of things. I don't think any of it is exclusive. So getting involved, I think I've been most excited about a lot of these sort of indigenous like land back movements and like the anti-pipeline stuff. But I think the anti-pipeline stuff like is just part of this larger understanding of how do we like decolonize our relationship to land and our relationship to the people who were here before we settled.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit? I had the delight of watching your TEDx talk recently and engaging with your ideas around interdisciplinary engagement and activism, and in that you're demonstrating how through your music you are continuing to be an activist, and how we can all find our art, find our voices, and share that passion from any direction. Where has that taken you? And have you seen, are there a myriad of other people around you who, some of which you might go like, this person's doing a really great thing in creativity within that activism space?
Yeah, I mean, music and art in general, I think is a great way of connecting people, because like you need some way, I like music particularly because I can talk about issues in a way that not only makes them make more sense, but also makes them interesting to listen to. So one of my inspirations for sure in the music realm is Kathleen Hanna from the band Bikini Kill, like one of the like riot girl bands from like Olympia, back in the 90s. And the story goes that like she was into spoken word, and she was talking to this older feminist spoken word artist who was just like, why do you want to do spoken word? And Hannah was like, because I want to like get the word out about feminism and like try and create social change. And the older woman was like, well, nobody listens to spoken word, like you should make music. And she started a band that everybody knows now. And so I think that's like kind of an interesting way to communicate with people. And I've toured Central Europe, I've toured all down the Pacific Northwest with various bands, and it's a great way to communicate, it's a great way to connect, and it's also a great way to build social power. A lot of times in organizing spaces, we talk about this sort of spectrum of like people who are like already organized, already in the fight, people who like maybe have similar ideals but aren't necessarily organizing, all the way to like people who are like polarized against us and, you know, against our values, against the fight. And so I think like that sort of dial is like where a lot of my organizing, I'm very conscious of like, where am I going? And so for the people who are like right here, who are almost in the fight but maybe haven't figured out a way yet, like if they come to a show and you can like get them inspired, get them pumped up, maybe like give them some like literature to get like point them in the right direction, then you get something like what happened last summer.
Yeah. Well, and it's that emotional connection that people don't have to facts per se, but the art inspires them, much like this film, quite honestly, because I've characterized this as a superhero film already to several people. and you know, Marvel, you know, eat your heart out, come on. I want to jump back to kind of the government space. And is there anything going on? And obviously, there's not a lot going on that's moving in a positive direction within government. But is there anything either on a city level, state level, or even on the national level that is happening that is like we should, one, be aware of it, and two, you know, get behind this happening in additional places, other places, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, you know, and this is where things get exciting. You know, as doing this kind of work, it's really depressing when you're talking to the climate scientists about climate change impacts, right? You know, we're losing our coral reefs, you know, the wildfires that we're experiencing, you know, that's hard. What's exciting is when you talk to the energy experts, because they're the ones who, you know how feasible and doable it is to transition our energy system into something that doesn't harm our children and make our planet unlivable. So there's tremendous amount of optimism in terms of what can be done to our energy system. And we have new defendants in the case, you know, with the Biden administration, and they've said a lot of wonderful things. You know, they understand the devastating impacts of climate change. They recognize it's an emergency. They recognize that young people are disproportionately affected. So our hope is with them as new defendants that they want to defend the case in a different way than the Trump administration and come to the table and work with the youth to actually get these things done. One of the things we saw with Obama, you know, he was hoping to secure a climate legacy, and all of the progress that he did on climate, the Trump administration was able to roll it back in a matter of 2 weeks. You know, they can't do that if they enter into a settlement agreement with the young people. It can secure that legacy so that it sustains political changes, which is vitally important. And then also on the state level, you're seeing very exciting things in terms of planning and to decarbonize our energy system. You know, Washington is doing some very interesting things, and where it struggles is in the implementation side of that. You know, they definitely know what needs to be done. Governor Inslee has been very, very clear about that, but they just haven't been able to get the job done. You know, it's the politics have really stood in the way. It hasn't been an issue of will. So there's a lot going on that's very exciting. And, you know, there's a lot of folks working on decarbonization, whether it's in our energy system, our transportation systems, and the government's starting to work on that. And I think those efforts need to be supported in any way that we can.
Yeah.
I would also say that I think it's really encouraging seeing the Biden administration bring climate justice into so many different realms of the work that they're doing and then into the different agencies. This is the first time that we've ever had, you know, climate justice be a focus in so many of these various agencies. I think that's really encouraging. Also, you know, the nomination and confirmation of Deb Haaland as an Indigenous person who understands the importance of respecting tribal rights and these longstanding treaties. And I think that there's a lot of hope there, but we had a lot of hope, with the Obama administration as well. And as you saw in the film, Obama made us the biggest oil and gas producer in the world. So I think we really just have to we have to keep at this, and we have to, and this is the whole point of accountability. Is you can say whatever you want, but it's the actions really that are going to matter at the end of the day.
Yeah. And as far as next steps go, and especially perhaps here, starting with the film, obviously, playing in film festivals, we're connecting with audiences and building an audience for it. What's your vision, and how do we, as an audience who just saw the film, help you realize your vision to connect this to schools, or connect this to community centers, or HBO? I don't know, but whoever.
If you want to connect it to HBO, that's great.
Yeah, there we go. If you have connections.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we're really excited to be in the beginning stages of our film festival circuit, and really excited also about the virtual world has been, to some degree, launching a film in a virtual festival world has been a bummer in terms of the film people not being able to come together and be in live audiences and in theaters with people and hearing their reactions and having personal conversations. But on the other hand, it's opened up this world to people who normally don't go to film festivals, and provided them an opportunity to see this film and to hear this really important story. So we are excited about those possibilities, and about the educational programming that so many film festivals are doing. We have a very strong and robust impact campaign that we hope to be launching soon. And that campaign is going to be focused on government accountability and working with young people in disenfranchised and marginalized communities, and giving them the tools and resources, and connecting them to other groups that are doing work around government accountability, and giving ways for young people to be more engaged in their civic actions and being a part of their democracy. So we're really excited about that, as well as our educational distribution, which we also hope to launch later this year.
Excellent. I'm super excited to support that in any way, shape, or form. We are planning an engagement for schools here in the Seattle area, which by the time you're watching this will have probably happened already. Will have happened already, because it will. But yeah, we're connecting it with Seattle schools as we speak, and really looking forward to engaging not just with viewing the film, but the post-screening conversation, and amplifying their interests and passion for it. Andrea, what's next for you? How can we support what you're doing in your work with Our Children's Trust, or here in the Washington State litigation that you're working on as well?
Yeah, so our Children's Trust, we're a nonprofit organization. So, all of our litigation is funded by by foundations and individuals. And we not only do the litigation, but we have, we do a lot of outreach and other kind of education work with young people as well, in terms of educating about democracy and some of the things that Christi talked about. A lot of our plaintiffs will certainly know the court system in and out more than most people would, for better or worse. And then please just follow our cases. Things happen quickly at times and very slowly at other times, but within the next month, we should have a decision from Judge Aiken on our motion to amend the complaint, so we will know which direction we're headed in again, whether we're headed to trial or if we're headed up to the United States Supreme Court, which is a very big endeavor, which will need a tremendous amount of support from every individual we can muster support from. And then also our other cases, are being litigated. Our Washington State case is hopefully heading up to the Washington Supreme Court. We have petitioned for review there, and we should get a decision from that court later this summer. And we're waiting for decisions in our cases in Alaska, Canada, and Florida. So there's a lot going on, and more cases are currently being developed as well. So we have a tremendous amount of resources for people who are interested in science, law, climate change, whatever it is. We're there to support people.
Yeah,
I
fabulous.
have to say the Canadian case has the coolest name. It's La Rose versus Her Majesty the Queen.
Ooh,
I know,
now
we
we're
got to sue
talking.
the Queen. Isn't that
I'm
cool?
gonna go and sue the Queen now. That sounds exciting.
I know. That was the best part of that case.
Oh my gosh. You got to find the little nuggets of joy where you can, I suppose. That's magic. Kiran, how can we support what you're working on?
Boy, I mean, I would say really looking to what's going on locally, because like there's a lot of fights happening all over the world, but I think it's important to really know what's going on in your own area. I know in Oregon, there's been a fight against the Jordan Cove pipeline down in Southern Oregon, and a lot of friends. So on our case, and this kind of goes back to what Christi was talking about, how like we're trying to go to the top, to the government, and like change the whole system rather than just doing the whack-a-mole approach. But at the same time, like as long as they're stalling us, they're just going to keep trying to put in as much fossil fuel infrastructure as they can. So we do have to like stop that. So the Jordan Cove pipeline fight down in Southern Oregon is definitely something I've been following, and I think they had a recent good news, but it's been going on for over 10 years.
Sure.
And yeah, I know Line 3 in the Midwest is another pipeline that there's been a big fight about. Again, I live off the grid. I don't have cell service or Wi-Fi at my house, so I'm not super in the loop
Yeah.
as I once was. But I try and keep up to date and like support whatever I can get to.
Yeah.
I would really encourage people to figure out what pipelines they're trying to build in your own state, in your own region, and support the folks who are already doing the work. Because I'm sure, and to anyone who's watching this, I'm sure there's somebody doing the work a lot closer to you.
Yeah. Agreed. Last question here before we close up is, for any young people watching, is there anything that you wished you heard, really for anyone here, when you were young, to encourage you to get involved, and any hurdle that was like, God, if someone had just gone, I need to do this, that you would encourage them to start doing and getting involved in?
Well, can I say a quote from Jacob from the movie? This always sticks in my mind. Jacob said, "We can choose to make a difference, and sometimes really big things happen." And I just love that quote, because there are, as Kiran said, there's so many different ways to get engaged. In your local community, at your state, and just on millions of ways to get engaged. And I think just taking that step and doing it is what's really important, because we will win our case, and that's a big thing, but doing all of those steps is so important. So I think young people need to hear that, because it's so hard to be young today. And Kelsey said this, I think, in the film, that it's hard to be a young person today. And, supporting and helping and, just going forward and getting engaged is what's, I think, so inspiring, and has really helped young people take control of their futures,
Yeah. Well,
I also think,
go ahead.
I think when I was a young person, I don't think I understood the systems well enough to, I think the young people today are definitely more plugged in to the systems and how they work, and how to make them work for them than my generation knew how to do. I feel like I'm the generation that like missed out. It's like my mom's generation were the protesters in the streets in the 60s, and like and then there was the protests after my generation, and I feel like my generation got lost in the 80s music or something. But
fair enough.
But I think that knowledge is power. And I think that the more you learn, and the more you're exposed, and the more you educate yourself or question things. And it's one thing that I do love about this film is, I do feel like it is a lot of we did try to educate with the film, and there is a lot of knowledge in there that I really hope that young people can also take and understand, that they can, apply this to their lives, and that's powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And Kiran, you said something earlier that I was reminded of while Andrea was talking, in terms of just the fact that you never expected this case to be what it was. I mean, you got involved and like, yeah, sure, this seems like something here. I mean, we never know what those little steps are that suddenly we find ourselves on a national stage, and if we don't try that, as Andrea said, we never get anywhere. I mean, I've always loved the reality that if even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Was a quote that I remember when I was growing up. That was like, nope, don't just be complacent. Keep moving, keep going, keep pushing, etc. along that line. And my God, all three of you inspire me so much, and I value having the opportunity to thank you so much for bringing your experiences to us in cinematic form in a way that is emotional and passionate and fired up. And I am that much more active and inspired to be active because of it. And my God, I hope that everyone who is watching this is and continues following the work that you're all doing, both the film and our Children's Trust, and perhaps even Kiran. Go check out the TEDx talk. It's fabulous. There's a song that I've been singing all day. So it's great fun. Thank you all, and thank you. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Seattle International Film Festival. Thank you.